Welcome to the Political Insider, and we have a great political insider to catch us up today, and that is the former mayor of Tshwane and perhaps the future mayor of Tshwane, and that is Cilliers Brink. Cilliers, welcome to the Political Insider.
Mike, it's great to be here.
You see, first time you're on this channel, you've been on the State of the Nation a few times. We like one of those guys with two cell phones.
You owe somebody money.
Yeah, never sure. You can't trust anybody with more than one cell phone. But if they've got four, taken straight to jail. The commission of inquiry for that shit, I tell you. So, Cilliers, tell us, you guys have really jumped the gun. Right, we had the big announcement of Helen Zille as the Joburg mayoral candidate, yourself as the Tshwane candidate. And off air, I was asking you, we are still about a year away from the local government elections. You're getting a very early start on this. You don't think it's too early, do you?
We start early because it gives us a competitive advantage. If you prepare for an election, there are so many things to sort out. You've got to raise money. You've got to nominate candidates. You have to establish structures. You have to have election day readiness, which includes catering, transport, voter activation. It is such an immense logistical, political and managerial exercise to prepare for an election. So if you have your candidates of the major metros selected, you at least clear away a lot of the work. And these things also work in phases. So we don't jump in with a manifesto, for example. Helen and I have spoken about our solutions and what ideas we have for fixing government, but you don't jump in with your commitments. You first embark on what we call a listening tour, where you go and check circumstances, you speak to people, you understand municipal services from the perspective of the consumer. It's easy from a council perspective or from memory what we saw in government. But if you don't actually speak to people, to the businesses, to the churches, to the community leaders, you might miss something. So that is the phase of the campaign. In Tshwane, of course, they're giving a lot of material. This ANC-EFF-ActionSA coalition is giving a lot of material for us as opposition. And maybe that's the difference between me and Helen. Helen is outside of the council. I am in the council as leader of the opposition. So I still have to hold the government to account while putting together a campaign for the alternative. But it is something to keep in mind, not to exhaust yourself before the race starts.
And tell me about the ammunition that they're giving you.
So, so many things. In the first instance, the Hammanskraal water project, which we had a crucial role in devising a solution to that and to eventually eliminating water tankers, that thing is stalled. You go to speak to residents of Hammanskraal, they'll tell you in the phase that the water project has already been launched, there's no water at all. Folks tell you stories such as the municipality truck or the municipal water truck comes by and then they charge additional money for what taxpayers already pay. The city has never spent more on water tankering than now, 777 million rand. Between January and June of this year, the city had more load shedding than when Eskom implemented load shedding, more power outages than under Eskom load shedding. They've introduced a city cleansing levy to plug the budget deficit, but nobody knows who is meant to pay this levy. There's confusion. The city is the most confused of all. And then lastly, you have a deputy mayor whose name is Eugene Modise, who's also the member of the mayoral committee for finance, the person who's meant to be driving the financial recovery, implicated in a contract doing business with the municipality. Didn't declare it, didn't divest it. And the mayor has this information. She just hasn't moved. So it's clear that this ActionSA mayoralty is a front for ANC domination.
Yeah, because CB is from the ANC, isn't he?
Yeah, Modise. Eugene Modise. He is the leader of the ANC, and in fact, he is now also running to become their regional chair. He was the regional chair before. Of course, then the structures were disbanded, and now he's running again. And I think the mayor has just been told, you can't move on this guy until the ANC has made a decision about his future.
Yeah, just to refresh our memories, because one of the sticking points in the build-up to the national election, a lot of noise, and of course we're going to hear even more noise when it comes to local government elections, and that was around thresholds, because that creates a problem. We've seen it most glaringly in Johannesburg, where Al Jamar with 3 people in the Johannesburg Council, 2 of them become mayors, neither of them competent to be mayors. We're being held captive by one candidate from AIC, Margaret Arnold. Does all sorts of wonderful things. And then, of course, there was our old friend from Cope, who's now with MK. What's her name?
Colleen Makubela.
Right. One party seat that held the whole city to hostage, right, and broke the previous coalition. Has there been any movement on this issue of thresholds?
I believe there's been some informal discussions at national level. I'm not privy to those discussions. You will have to ask the national political leaders. But clearly, the 2 largest parties in the country, the ANC and the DA, have got an interest at first glance in a consolidation of the politics. Because the fragmentation of parties means that you've got to please so many different stakeholders when putting together a coalition, that your agenda, at least if you've got a proper agenda, not an agenda of insiders and bribing and so on, but your agenda of delivery to the outside becomes diluted. In Johannesburg, I know that there are 19 political parties in council. I think if there's a 1% threshold, that reduces the 19 to 9 or 10, which makes negotiations far easier. And eliminates an element of this thing, which in Afrikaans we call it een dag vlieg, a fly that lives for one day. Now you get political parties that only live between elections, and then they're gone. 5-year terms, and then they're gone. They appoint family members on the payroll and so forth, and those leaders aren't held accountable. So I think there's a case to be made that the larger political parties, not just the DA and the ANC, might benefit a little bit more from a consolidation in the politics. But there are ups and there are downs as well. You might end up reducing the number of parties that you can negotiate with to form a coalition. But it might also prompt the electorate to make a serious choice, to say government is going in either one of 2 directions, DA-led or ANC-led. And you must understand which parties are aligned to those 2 constellations.
Yeah, for those people watching that are a little bit confused as to what we're talking about, thresholds. This is an idea that has been used in countries where there's been a long history of coalitions. They found that these small parties can be problematic. You can imagine if you need that one vote, and you can, as happened in the city of Johannesburg, for example, you could change the entire governance if one person moves party. In this case, it was Cope. All she had to do was change her vote from here to here, and she was well looked after to move her vote from here to here. And it ended up bringing down one coalition in favor of another. And you end up with dirty politics, because it's the only way to put it, because you've got these little one-man parties that you just have to take care of one person or offer them positions, and they'll change their vote. They don't give a damn about the electorate. They don't give a damn about the future, because they have no future. So that's the idea of thresholds, that you say, okay, if you haven't polled more than a certain amount, and we were talking about 1%, but if it's 1 or 2%, then if you get below that, you actually don't have a say in how the council is formulated.
Yeah, it's raising the barrier of entry into politics for the serious parties that can actually bring votes and that can sustain a case. And if you look at our electoral system, the list system, proportional representation, it is designed to produce coalitions. That's not what they thought about when they negotiated it at CODESA in the early 90s. They were just thinking, let's maybe protect minorities who might otherwise not be there. But the reality is it has now produced coalitions everywhere. And if you're going to have a system that produces coalitions, you might as well have something in there that makes the coalitions work. And fewer parties just means more manageable governments.
Yeah, because if you're a mildly charismatic politician, you might say, I could leave the DA in your case, maybe go and get 1% of the vote, 1 seat for myself, and maybe 2 seats for my wife gets the other one. And then you can influence who runs the city, and maybe something lands in your something somewhere, and the next thing you are the kingmaker, and you could be the mayor.
And in the next 5 years, there's another guy and his wife.
Yeah.
And they've got a different program of action, and everything that was done before just falls apart.
Yeah.
And that causes the chaos in our coalition.
Because if we look at the city of Johannesburg, and the same counts for Nelson Mandela Bay, those one-seat parties that have destabilized those cities, they couldn't care about the damage that they make, but their balance sheet personally looks quite nice. They've got no future anyway.
And sometimes the bigger parties, i.e. the ANC, use the smaller parties to front. You put a third-party mayor or a small party mayor in Joburg, Tshwane, that system is still in place. You make the decision, but somebody else fronts for what's going on. And that dilutes political accountability.
Yeah. So it was spoken about, and it was raised quite heavily around the multi-party charter time. The ANC wasn't too keen because they're quite happy to game the system, as we've said.
That's before they were clubbed and lost,
lost a few cities.
18% of their vote nationally.
Yeah. And of course, now they could end up being the smallest party in all three of the Gauteng metros, plus a few more nationwide. They may suddenly see it the way that the DA has seen it.
Yeah.
So it could be very interesting. This Rooiwal water plant thing in the city of Tshwane, which has been such a bugbear, is this just now? We understand there's looting, and there's been a million stories written about it, and it's a really ugly story that goes all the way back to 2010, 2011, somewhere there, when the contract was first negotiated. And the main contractor there, Edwin Sodhi, is well known to everybody. He is one of the ANC tenderpreneurs. Something has been done, but it's not finished. And now it seems like nobody's really rushing to finish it. Is that the problem?
So Rooiwal is a wastewater treatment plant. It should have been upgraded in 2004 when the city's master plan indicated that the population growth and the strain of the infrastructure means that this thing is going to be overloaded. It became overloaded in 2011 when the first environmental infringement notices were issued. And as the population has grown, urbanization has increased, so the strain on that infrastructure has just worsened. About 75% of all wastewater from Tshwane, Pretoria, Centurion, all of that goes through Rooiwal. And it's important that that facility be upgraded. My own idea is we are probably going to need a private sector partner to do the final phase of that upgrade, because Tshwane simply doesn't have the money to do that by ourselves as a city. But in the meantime, what happened is a solution was devised to draw water from the Pinars River. Now, Rooiwal is built on the Apies River. It pollutes the Apies River, the Leeuwkraal Dam, and that is where Hammanskraal gets its water from. It's so polluted that you can't even purify that water, and that's why you need water tankers. So the solution devised with national government in my term of office was build a package plant on the Pinars River and then purchase water through that package plant from Magalies Water, the entity of national government. That package plant has been built, interestingly, probably the biggest modular water treatment plant on the African continent. Marvelously done, very quickly done as well. Now the problem is to reticulate that water to get it into Hammanskraal taps. And that part of the project, Tshwane's part of the project, seems to be neglected. Now, it doesn't mean that the project can't be completed, but you are going to need the political will to drive that to conclusion, because you've got so many vested interests that would rather have water tankers running. And I just want to make the point about water tankers. The more money a municipality spends on water tankers, the worse for the future, because every rand that goes into water tankers doesn't go into fixing pipes, installing taps, making sure that there's formal water reticulation. Water via tankers adds no value. They just charge for the kilometers traveled. They, in fact, fill them at municipal fire hydrants. It's not like these folks purify water and then they just fill it up. Water in your tap is also, it's not just more convenient, it's also far cheaper. So our concern is that in this 2025 financial year, the water tankering budget went up from 140 million to 777 million. Now, that is all money that could have built infrastructure, and it is a very concerning trend. The capital of the city is being liquidated in order to meet the consumption needs of connected individuals. And that is one of the things we have to roll back.
Yeah. Let me just link your local government campaign, what we've been discussing, with these commissions of inquiry that are playing out at the moment, which show the sort of the system whereby organized crime links up with police, corrupt police, with compliant politicians doing this, right down to the lowest level where that person is in on it. It runs in a circular way. It's a very simple treatment, very simple idea. If we look at the Tembisa Hospital, it's, what's the threshold? In that case, any order under 500,000 could be authorized at Tembisa Hospital. Somebody's just signing off on the inside. Clearly, politicians are getting kickbacks. So we already know that, and the crime syndicates were then taking the money, and people are dying. Now, the same system applies with water tankers.
Yes.
In essence, there's no difference.
And many other aspects of municipal governance.
So the question is, even if you won a majority, is the situation fixable?
So the first point is, and this is a tough question for us going into government, can it actually be fixed, even if you have the numbers? So the first issue is to understand the problem as systemic. And I don't want to use fancy words, but systemic means that, like at Tembisa Hospital, it's not just the hospital chief. It's the person that's the payments clerk.
Yeah.
It's the trade union representative, the shop steward. It's the nurse. It's the person that communicates with the Gauteng government. So it's almost as if there's an invisible hand. Adam Smith talks about the invisible hand of the market. It's almost as if there's an invisible hand of different people at different levels of the organization, not just the highest salary earners or the decision makers, but there's a chain of people that cooperate, and each takes their share in looting the system. So if you understand that, you know that once you start taking that chain apart, the other actors are going to protest. If there was effective action at Tembisa Hospital, say the head of the hospital was called to account immediately, there would have been protests, there would have been strikes, there would have been unions going up, there would have been complete chaos. Now, if you understand that, you can anticipate the violent reaction that will come once you start taking these networks apart. Then the approach has to be, look at the topmost position in the organization and replace that person. Replace that person as a matter of course, not replace that person after an investigation
or suspend them.
Suspension, or just, you have been presiding over an institution. Whatever the budget, whatever the excuses, you have failed. You must go. You must go. Because if you don't go, there's no chance of changing anything. And then once you've installed somebody who is competent, who doesn't have political connections, and of course you're going to the next thing you're going to tell me is, like, where are those people? You've got to find them. You've got to actively headhunt them. Then it becomes very important to support them when there's the backlash, when there are the accusations, when there is the protests, when there is the intentional sabotaging of the system. So it has to be a combination of new leadership, support for the new leadership under difficult circumstances. Let's call it management. Let's assume the politicians provide the leadership. And then I also believe technology has a very important part to play. If you read the book, The Shadow State, the one thing that's lamented over and over, even by the Ombudsman for Health, I can't recall his name, is that they still work on Excel spreadsheets and Croxley books instead of digital systems. And the Excel spreadsheets and the Croxley books aren't auditable, whereas the digital systems, once you have that IT infrastructure and once you have the management to protect it, you've got a far better chance of holding people to account.
Yeah, and of course you've missed the most important step in that, and that is that you need a policeman, a police force where you can go and say, Mike's running this department, we've seen, here's all the proof.
I'm not sure we can count on the police, Mike.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's got to be something that comes out of these commissions.
It has to be something that comes out of the commissions, but I just don't see inspirational leadership. Mkanwazi, we can praise him for the courage and, taking on the system, but who's taking responsibility for fixing that? I don't see that being solved immediately. The prosecuting authority is another nightmare. So a lot of the things that we're going to have to do in the metros in particular in the next few years has to make account or take account of the fact that we're not going to have that strong police and justice system reinforcement that we require. The other day I went and met with Helen from AfriForum's private prosecuting unit. Now you can think about AfriForum and Solidarity, you can differ with their politics or their constituents, but that thing that they're doing is unique. They've actually taken a dead provision in the Criminal Procedure Act on private prosecutions, the prosecutions that the state don't want to drive. And they've built an institution to support private prosecutions. Other institutions should do it too, but they're not actually doing it. We don't see other people driving private prosecutions. And so initiatives like that coming from civil society are important. We as a municipality can work with somebody like Harinal to say, here we've cancelled a tender, or here we've tried to blacklist this service provider, but the police aren't investigating it, the prosecuting authority aren't paying attention. And through those institutions, we can try and make up a little bit of what has been left by the wayside by the state.
So now we get to, we come all the way back to the campaigning. It's, you guys have taken the head start. You do a lot of polling. What's it looking like for the future of the city of Tshwane? We've had recently Herman Mashaba, being very upbeat because of the performance of Nasipi Moya. The ANC, heaven knows what they're going to be doing, but you guys have come out there with big names, yourself, Helen, etc., known names. What do you think the knock-on is going to be? We already see in Johannesburg that we're probably going to have Herman himself standing against Helen Zille, for Yiswa Ramakgopa for Unite for Change, etc. What's it looking like as you seeing it now for the DA in the city of Tshwane?
So maybe let me just comment on one aspect of that. The prospect of Herman Mashaba as a candidate in Johannesburg. I don't live in Johannesburg. It's his decision to make. But there's been a very important book that has come out. And I think you've interviewed one of the authors, Mike Reddy, yes, and Paulie van Wyk, on Malema and his patronage network. And there are a set of chapters, I think about 3, dedicated to what happened in Johannesburg when Herman Mashaba was the mayor. And he effectively, by turning a blind eye or by expedient politics, created an enabling environment for money to flow to the coffers of Julius Malema, the patronage network, fleet tenders. And Mashaba as mayor was very, very aggressive in defending that relationship he had with the EFF. And I think that model of what happened in Johannesburg is exactly what is happening in Tshwane now. Only more than the EFF, it's the ANC patronage networks that are benefiting from an ActionSA mayor. Now, you could say Mashaba was a DA mayor. He was an ActionSA mayor. But thank goodness we got rid of him. And the residents of Johannesburg have to think carefully whether they want a replay of that. And I would commend to read those chapters to understand what Mashaba meant for Joburg. It was a disastrous period of time. But on the issue of polling, we don't discuss the details of the polling, and when it leaks, Helen Zille becomes very upset. She hasn't stepped down as chair of the FedEx yet. She's still finishing her work. So we don't comment on internal polling, but overall the trend looks good. Now that is enough to motivate us, to make a case to donors, to keep the spirits up. But it would be death for us to become complacent because we are polling consistently as the largest party in these metros. Polling is just a snapshot. It doesn't tell you how the politics will evolve. The polling that matters is the polling that happens on election day.
Yeah.
Whether it is at the ballot box or that snapshot that you can take through focus groups and whatever else they do. So the ground is fertile. There is an historical opportunity for change. Voters who voted for DA splinter parties in the past have seen the results of that. And I believe we can deliver a compelling message to make us the biggest party in the metros. We've got compelling candidates, but it is going to depend on what actually happens in the election, whether folks turn out to vote. When you speak to Helen, I'm not sure if she mentioned this to you, but in Johannesburg, there are thousands of residential complexes where you can't get in the bloody gate. You just can't get in there to speak to people, to knock on doors. And many of those people just don't vote. They live in enclaves, which, serve the immediate protection needs and so on. But in the meantime, the city is crumbling on the outside, and it's going to start crumbling inside the enclaves as well. Enclaves aren't going to protect you against citywide destruction. So the key for us is going to be to turn out the voters who want change in these cities and get them to the ballot box to vote for us.
Cilliers, I mentioned there the new formation, Unite for Change, which is a Sama smelting, sort of a unification of Rise Mzansi, Build One South Africa, and Good, under the new banner, the UFC, because they're ready to fight apparently, but the Unite for Change. Do you think that'll move the political needle as you see it?
Well, is it a Saba smelting? I'm not quite sure, because it was sort of tentative. The parties will continue to exist, but this, front, the UFC, will be established for the purpose of the election. To me, that's a bit of a, one foot here, the other foot there, and things dangling in between.
To say it's not the multi-party charter arrangement, even though it looks like one.
Yeah, it's going to be a difficult thing logistically to organize, because if you give money and you give support, who gets to spend the money? Where's the leadership structure and so forth? Best of luck to them. It is one hell of a job to run a political party and to hold people together with a unifying idea. I don't clearly see what the unifying idea is. Like you, I like Musi Maimane. I haven't got anything against him. Who's the other one in the mix? Rise Mzansi. And of course Patricia de Lille. She offers a lot. Yeah. So it's an interesting mix-up. It's just all three of those parties at a critical time when there was a fundamental disagreement about which direction the country should go, sided with the ANC. And I'm not just saying this to try and score points against a party which hasn't yet fielded itself. But when the VAT vote came to Parliament, those parties were cowed by the ANC into supporting a VAT hike and then explaining to the public that they weren't voting for a VAT hike. That was they were bamboozled, they were manipulated, and in turn, they misled the public. And you have to ask yourself, what is the true north of those political parties? What do they actually believe in? What is distinct in their worldview? If there's one person there, I have time for all of them, but if there's one person there that is a disaster in our politics, it's Brett Herron from the Good Party. I mean, he's just like the hired help of the ANC. The ANC doesn't exist in the Western Cape anymore. They've got Brett Herron. So what's that guy going to do in a coalition where there's serious thought about building an alternative? So we watch, with some interest. I would love to see in what direction those parties are going to take the metros. Currently, Good, for example, is in a coalition with the ANC, the EFF, and ActionSA in Tshwane. I'm not quite sure. I think they're probably in Joburg as well.
In Joburg as well.
Rise Mzansi is serving in the cabinet of Panyaza Lesufi, so they've also sort of been co-opted. And those parties, their challenge is to demonstrate clearly how they will be different from the ANC. Because you do have these two polar opposites in South African politics. And it's either you're going to move closer to the ANC vision or you're going to move closer to the DA vision. And those parties will have to decide.
I want to close off by asking you, it's going to be tight, and I can say it because I'm not the politician. It looks like you guys will do well, but you won't get an outright majority, right? There, sort of said, which means you could be looking for partners. Now, we know that you've had a good relationship with the Freedom Front Plus, although they did desert you down in the Cape. Are you comfortable? You don't have to mention names, that you could put together parties that would be supportive of a DA leadership in the city of Tshwane if it got close enough, if you needed to find another 5%, to say just out of the reach of you and potentially the Freedom Front Plus, would you have other potential partners?
I think Tshwane is the one place where we have the potential to form a coalition that doesn't include the ANC. And we have to be honest about it. Not having the ANC in your coalition is your number one prize. And that includes the ANC splinter parties, the EFF and MK. I mean, that goes without saying. If you can form a coalition without the ANC, you will have the most space and opportunity to clean things out. So you have to remember the ANC is connected to these cadre networks. So that's prize number one. In Tshwane, I believe it's possible. In 2016, we got 43.6, almost 44% of the vote. That's a very solid showing. But that was not enough to form a majority government. This time around, I do think that, yes, the Freedom Front Plus is an attractive prospect for a coalition partner. The ACDP, if they can figure out clearly where they stand, because sometimes in Gauteng they seem to be moving close to Panyaza Lesufi. But if those parties can clearly state their preferences for coalitions and what their program of action is, I believe you can form a successful coalition with them. Now, if that doesn't happen, and that'd be very unfortunate, you have to consider other possibilities. But then, even in the worst or the less good options, the stronger the DA is, the better the chance we get the mayor. And if we get the mayor, there's a lot of other powers that you get in terms of negotiations and in terms of making sure that you've got a strong relationship with a good city manager and so forth. But it will be the electorate that will decide. We can campaign, we can canvass, we can organize, we can raise funds, we can give our perspectives and answer difficult questions. But we will ultimately have to deal with what the voters give us. And there you have to consider a wide range of options.
Do you have a sense yet of how well Mkhonto Wesizwe hasn't stood in local government yet? We know that nationally they got more than 14.5% in the last election. They haven't been tested. The signs aren't overly promising because since that election they've done some fairly sort of strange things. But do you have a sense what kind of polling they're going to do in city of Tshwane?
The one thing you have to realize about MK is that they're not a conventional political party. The reason why nobody saw them coming, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, is that the MK canvassed in ANC T-shirts. They went door to door and nobody saw them because they were campaigning for the true ANC, which in their version is MK. That's also why Jacob Zuma tried to hang on to his ANC membership. I never understood this thing, but it's part of a strategy. They want to project themselves as the true ANC. They organize themselves from within ANC structures, very often campaigning in ANC regalia, only with the understanding in a very tightly knit constituency that the MK is the real ANC. That's how you would achieve radical economic transformation and so on. So that's what makes them difficult to gauge. In terms of by-election participation, we had a by-election in Mamelodi the other day, ANC Heartland. They dropped from about 60% of the vote to 51% in Mamelodi, Ward 10. Their councillor was tragically shot to death. And the parties who participated in that by-election were obviously the ANC trying to retain the ward, MK participated, EFF participated, we participated. ActionSA did not participate, which gives you a vote of their own confidence of what they'll do. And MK had quite a good showing in a place like Mamelodi, which shows that they are organized and they are on the ground and they do have a fighting chance. I never underestimate MK. I think they are going to be a factor to be reckoned with.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the local government elections are going to be a referendum of ideology over service delivery. Those are your two choices. And maybe it's time for voters to get out there, vote, as Cilliers says. Understand that this is your chance to vote for good governance, or you can choose ideology and sit with sewage streaming down your streets. That's the choice that voters face, especially in the Gauteng metros. But it is going to be mighty, mighty important. And one of the most influential young politicians in South Africa today Cilliers Brink sheds the light on it, and it was great to have you on the Political Insider. We'll
great to be here.
And to everybody that joined us, subscribe to the Political Insider. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining us.